Hey guys, and welcome back to our channel, Brad and Amy. Welcome if you're new. One of my favorite things to do is read. I have read over 700 books at this point. I'm so nerdy about it. I actually keep a spreadsheet of all the books I've read. As I've mentioned before in my videos, I have a bad memory, so that's the main reason why I keep track of all the books that I read. I do tend to lean a little bit more towards books that are not mainstream, that maybe I had never heard of the author before, but there are some books which you'll see in my top 10 list of authors that are very well known, such as Stephen King or Joyce Carol Oates, or actually I don't know if I have her in this collection, but there's going to be some in this list you may not have even heard of before. I certainly had not when I picked up the book. I have read each of these 10 books more than once, some of them several times. So without further ado, let's jump into this. So the first book on my top 10 list is The End of Mr. Y by Scarlett Thomas. It's hard to explain what The End of Mr. Y is about, really. The basic premise is that the main character is a young woman who finds a very rare book in a bookstore, and the story behind the book is that anyone who has ever read it has disappeared or died. It's not the kind of book I normally would have picked up, but since I've read this book, this is the kind of book that I go for now. It's a very intelligent book, but she writes in such a way that it's just like she's talking to you. I don't want to give too much away, but if you like different, this is different. The second book on my top 10 list is Spider by Patrick McGrath. This book has actually been made into a movie. I didn't love the movie. Obviously, I like the book much better than the movie because it's in my top 10 list. I tend to really like books that are written in the first person. I can relate to the person more because it's first person. They're talking, it's like they're talking directly to me. And this book is, for the most part, like that. It kind of goes back and forth a little bit. But the narrator is an unreliable narrator. I love those kinds of books, and it's not a very long book. I mean, as you can see, it's pretty thin. I love it. Highly recommend it. Number 3 on the list is by Steve Martin, and it is called The Pleasure of My Company. This is just a joy. I don't know how else to describe it. Again, it's in first person. This is just a joy to read. And I don't have OCD to the extent that the main character in the book does, but I could definitely relate to it. Number 4 on my list is by Elizabeth McNeil, which is actually a pseudonym. I cannot remember what her real name is. It did finally come out who the actual author was, and I cannot remember her name. But it's 9.5 weeks. Now, the movie is great. I've always liked the movie, but the book is very different from the movie. And since reading the book, it's actually kind of hard for me to watch the movie because I like the book so much better. This is very short, and you can read it easily in one sitting. By the end of it, I was just very emotionally distraught for her and for everything that she had gone through. Well, I don't want to give anything away, but the way it made me feel at the end was I wanted to know, is she okay? What happened to her? And anyway, it's just very good. Okay, so that was 4. This is number 5. I'm sure you've heard of this book. It is The Time Traveler's Wife by Audrey, I think Niffenegger is the way you pronounce her last name. I'm never sure. I absolutely was so into Henry and Claire's life and everything that goes on with them. The movie, I enjoyed the movie. Of course, I was not 100% thrilled with it. It's not as good as the book. I love time travel. Anything with time travel, books, movies. So many of the books that I do love involve time travel. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is. Number 6 on my list I read when I was 16 years old, and it is called And I Don't Want to Live This Life by Deborah Spungen, who is the mother of Nancy Spungen, who was murdered by her boyfriend Sid Vicious. If you've ever seen the movie Sid and Nancy, or if you are a fan of the Sex Pistols as I was when I was younger, you will love this book. And I recently reread it. I didn't think that I would still love it as much as I did at the time because I'm not really into that music anymore. I'm so far removed. I'm 30 years away from when I first read it, but I still loved it. As I said, it's written by Nancy's mother, and it's just heartbreaking, everything that they went through with a daughter like Nancy who had so many problems, mental issues. I could really relate to a lot of that. I just found it really fascinating. Number 7 on my list is by one of my very favorite authors, Stephen King, but this is not one of his fiction books. This is called On Writing, and I didn't think I was going to enjoy this book as much as I did. I've read it a couple times. I'm gonna say that about every single book. Part of the book is just him talking about how he got started and what it was like when he got that first phone call that his first book, Carrie, had done well and that he was gonna get a decent paycheck for that. And he had such humble beginnings, and I loved reading about that. And then he does write some about the craft of writing, which I'm not a writer, but I still enjoyed this book. So even if you're not an aspiring writer, but you love to read, you'll love this book. Number 8 on my list is a classic. It is by John Fowles, or Fowles, I'm not really sure how to pronounce it, but it is called The Collector. It was published in 1963. It's basically about a girl who is abducted by a man. The first half of the book is told from the man's perspective who abducts the girl. He really just wants to collect her like he collects his butterflies. It's very twisted. It's kind of Silence of the Lamb-ish, I suppose. But the second half of the book is from her perspective, and it's just, you get pulled right into this. I think it's that first person narrative that I really like. So that's The Collector by John Fowles. Number 9 on my list is one of my very favorite authors. I love him so much, David Sedaris. This one is called Dress Your Family in Corduroy and Denim. Almost all of his books are just a series of memoirs. Each chapter is just a memoir from something that's happened in his life. I know that he does embellish a bit on some of the things that have happened, but you get to know him, you get to know his family. I fell in love with his parents. His parents are just like the kind of parents that anyone would love to have. He writes as if he's talking right to you. And the thing that I really love about this book is that 2 years ago, my husband and I actually went to see David Sedaris in Cleveland, and we waited in line for a very long time afterwards to get him to sign my book, which he did, and he talked to me a little bit while he signed it. But it was so strange. He put to Amy, and then he drew, whoops, wrong side. And then he drew a pumpkin. Now, it was October, but it was just really strange. I was hoping that he would write something a little bit more than just to Amy, but I'm happy I got that. He's just one of my favorite authors. I don't know, I can't even tell you how many times I've read this book. Countless times. Okay, this is my favorite book of all time. I cannot imagine ever not having this as my number 1 favorite book. It is by Michel Faber. I think you pronounce his first name Michel. And it is called Under the Skin. This is the best book. I've read it so many times I've lost count. How do I even begin? You think it's about one thing, and then it ends up being completely about something else. You think it's about a woman who is picking up hitchhikers and kind of abducting these hitchhikers. That was intriguing to me because I thought, how's this one woman going to be able to do this, and why is she doing this, and where is she taking them? And when you realize what the book is really about, it is mind-blowing. Now, unfortunately, this book was made into a movie. The movie is nothing at all like this book, and I was so angry when I first saw the movie. I was offended, I was mad, I was like, that is not my main character, that's not my Iserly. Now, the main character's name is Iserly. It's probably Iserly, but I always thought of it as Iserly when I see it, so that's her name. Scarlett Johansson, who is wonderful in just about everything she does, I was like, she is not my Iserly. She's not her. I mean, you know how you can get, so you can personalize books or movies so much that, you know, they're yours, you know, they're part of you. And so when you see a movie that completely changes it, that movie changed everything about this book, and I was so disappointed. Now, I can watch the movie completely separate from the book and I can appreciate it. I think it's a well-made movie. As long as you're not trying to say that it is based on this book, then it's a good movie. But it's not this book. I've never been the same since I read it. I just relate to the main character, which once you've read the book, you'll wonder why the heck I relate to her. But it's hard to explain. I guess the way she feels about things and the way she looks at the world and her decision at the end is something that I could relate to in this really strange way. It's hard to explain it. I don't want to give anything away, but this book is absolutely wonderful. My favorite book of all time. So this is number 1 on my list. I just don't get tired of it. It's one of those books, even though I know the twist of the book, I still love it. I can't explain it. You know how it is when you just love something so much. So those are my top 10 books. I hope that it gave you some ideas of books to read. Please in the comments let me know, what are your favorite books, or what is your favorite book of all time? Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!